You hear that? That was my pug. He is pissed off. He does not like this. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for being here. Three things to address. Number one, my pug is snoring in that corner, so if you hear any weird noises, that's him. Secondly, my other dog really wants to be in this video, but she can't be because she's a menace. And so if you hear any, needy noises for attention, that's my other dog. She can't be here right now. She wishes she could be. And then thirdly, there is a little tiny hole in my sweater. You see it? I can see it from this far. And that's because I was hanging out with a little puppy on Christmas, and she's got those puppy nails, and she grabbed on and tore my brand new sweater. So if it annoys you or if you notice it, just know it's bothering me as well. Anyway, today's video, my friends, is going to be the best books of 2021 for me, myself, and I, but I would absolutely love to know what books you all particularly enjoyed this year, whether it was romance, whether it was a thriller, whether it was a memoir. What were your favorite books this year and why, if you feel like explaining? I have divided these books into different categories. So the first one we're gonna hit is my favorite book of all 2021. Then we're going to general fiction. Then we're going to mythology. Then we have short story collections. We have 4 books that I read for school, and then we have some romances to just cherry on top it before the video completes. So that's what today's video is going to be. And again, let me know what your favorite books were of the year. So we're going to start with my favorite book of the year. I was looking at all of the books that I read. I was staring at my bookshelves and I was like, what's the one? What's the crowned jewel of my reading year of 2021? The book that just did it all and did it all right. And that one is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This one worked so well. The writing was spectacular. It is a memoir. It's from Chanel Miller and her experience as Jane Doe in the Stanford sexual assault case from 2016. Was it 2016? I'm not sure on the year. I just know that it was a very, very big deal in the Bay Area when it happened, which is where I'm from. And so reading her perspective was enlightening and devastating and vulnerable. I felt like the writing was spectacular, and the audiobook, which I was listening to at the same time that I read it, was so vulnerable. Chanel Miller's the one that narrates her own memoir. And you can hear her emotion and her fears and her sadness and her triumph throughout the entire audiobook. And I thought it was wonderfully done. It was devastating. It was just powerful in so many ways. So this was my favorite book of 2021. And I'd love to know what your all-time favorite book of 2021 was as well. So that is where we are starting. All right, so Know My Name was my favorite book of the year. It was also my favorite memoir of the year. Now we're moving to general fiction. The first one in this category is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This book was spectacular. There's a bit of mystery in it and so much about family and specifically sibling dynamics that you unpack throughout the entire novel. There are some siblings that are working through what it's like to be the oldest child and the middle child and the youngest child, and just what that does for the 3 of their relationships. Then we have a death of one of the siblings, and there's the mystery of trying to uncover how it happened, when it happened, and how that incident of death ripples out throughout the family, not just with the siblings, but also with the parents, and what that means for their marriage and just the family dynamics as a whole. So I devoured this book. I read it so fast and I didn't want it to end. And I just felt like it wasn't strictly a thriller or a mystery. It was very strong on like the family exploration, but I was so driven to figure out what had happened, and I just was gripped the entire time, and I just thought the writing was so well done. So really loved this one, and definitely one of my favorites this year. The next book in the general fiction category is If We Were Villains. This is a book that you either love or you hate, it seems. I see very few people that are just indifferent to it. It seems like it's really polarizing, and for me, I was one of those people that really loved it. I thought that the mystery itself was intriguing. I thought the exploration of Shakespeare's play as a way to tell the story was fascinating and made me more excited to be a literature major. You know, it was just one of those things where I was like, wait, I've taken a Shakespeare class. Shakespeare comes up all the time. So even though I didn't know all the plays that were discussed in this book, I still felt like this is cool. So basically this is about a group of friends, and back in college when they're going to this prestigious art school, one of their core friends in the group is murdered. And you're kind of getting the story from the present tense, like 20 years after the event, and you're going back in time and trying to figure out what happened and how did the murder take place and who's at fault. And you know that everyone in the group knows something, you just don't know how guilty each person is. And it was just exhilarating. I had so much fun reading this, and again, I know that I've seen a lot of people say that the Shakespeare is overwhelming. For me, even though I didn't know all the plays, I really appreciated it because I felt like the descriptions and the author paired the Shakespeare plays well enough with what was going on with the characters themselves that I felt like I was able to follow along really well. Yeah, anyway, it's one of my favorites. All right, the next book is a book that I already unhauled, so I don't have the physical copy, but it is Sharks in the Time of Saviors. I read this over the summer when I was reading a lot of ocean, beach-themed books, and this is one that completely stands out that I loved so much because, again, we're dealing a lot with family dynamics, but specifically sibling dynamics. There are 3 siblings, and you're seeing how the oldest versus the middle versus the youngest all deal with their proximity in the family, right? The youngest sibling is noticing things that the older siblings never noticed. The older siblings have a view on life that the youngest sibling will never have, and their parents' relationship and just the understanding of family. And I just thought it was fascinating. There's also a lot of spirituality and the exploration of the self and what that means in the broader stroke of humanity and the world. And I just thought it was wonderfully done. Basically, one of the siblings, Noah, has always had something just a little something to him. There was something like he had a connection with the world that everyone else noticed and not everyone else has. He was just able to kind of predict things or know things that no one else was. And then at one point he falls into the ocean and the sharks start to surround him, and the family thinks that he's gonna die. And instead one of the sharks puts him in his jaw and delivers him back to the family. And then after that, their entire lives change, and Noah's abilities in the world grow, but the expectations for who he's supposed to be also grow, and the pressure on his shoulders is so much. I also think that the audiobook was spectacular. I just talked about this in another video, but this audiobook each character gets a different narrator voice, and I love when audiobooks do that. And so this one just really stuck out as a performance and a story. And again, the sibling dynamics was just so fantastic to explore. So really, really enjoyed this one. Okay, and the last book in the general fiction category is, unsurprisingly, one that deals a lot with sibling dynamics. Jesus, she's a broken record. And that is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read this when I was near a beach, so it felt so much more real to me. I was like, wow, the ocean is calling and I have to answer the phone. You know what I'm saying? So I had a lot of fun with this one. It's not a sequel to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but it is just slightly tied to it, which I enjoyed. It basically follows the 4 Riva siblings, who are the children of Mick Riva, who comes up in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And it's about their relationship with their father, as well as their relationship with each other, and their father's relationship with their mother. And so there's a lot of layers of family, right? We have the start of a family and their families when they're first getting married and learning about each each other and like going on dates. Then we have the start of their family, and then we have years later when the 4 siblings are their only family. So lots of layers. A lot of it takes place on the beach, so I definitely recommend reading this during the summer, like when it's a little warmer out, because it would not be fun reading it right now in the cold, rainy dead of winter. But I had so much fun with it, and it just really stuck out to me as a book in 2021. I also read it twice, so that's another reason why it really stuck out to me. So yeah, that is it for the general fiction. Now let's move on to the mythology fiction that I read this year. The first one is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This is a book all about the Trojan War, but specifically through multiple women's perspectives from each side. We have some women on the Greek side, we have some women on the Trojan side, and then we have some goddesses, people who aren't really on a side, but are just kind of reflecting on the war as a whole. People who are actually participating in the war, people who are reflecting on the war from afar. And so if you've ever been interested in mythology, I feel like this book really helped me understand just Trojan War history, kind of, but then from perspectives you don't read as often. And so I really enjoyed this, and there were so many women that got chapters, which was really fascinating to me. It was like people I would have never thought of to get a perspective in this book would pop up, and it was incredible, and I thought the writing was really stunning, so I really loved this one. The second book in this category is The Silence of the Girls, which is another book that really focuses on the Trojan War, but this follows really only one perspective, which is Briseis, who is Achilles' captive. You see some of Briseis in the Song of Achilles, but you get kind of a romanticized version of her story. She's more of a friend after some time, and in this, she is very much a captive. She is very much someone who has held on to a lot of anger and resentment and wants revenge and is disgusted and horrified with things that are going on the Greek camps. So it was fascinating. I thought the writing was really good, and I loved just getting mainly Briseis' perspective, because I think after reading 1,000 Ships and reading from so many different women's perspectives, reading just from Briseis was a really cool way to learn about a similar subject, but just through a different lens. So I really enjoyed these two and highly recommend. And actually, that reminds me, I haven't read this one yet, but I did just pick up The Women of Troy, which is by the same author that wrote The Silence of the Girls. So if you've read this one, let me know what you thought. If you've read both of them, which one was better? Let's talk about it, because I'm really excited to get to this one. All right, next we're going to talk about 4 books I read for school over the last 2 semesters, because spring and fall both happened in 2021. So some of these I read like 7+ months ago. Some I just recently finished that I really enjoyed. And actually, next semester should be my last one. And I'm very excited, but I have to read 50 books over the next 5 months. And I'm freaking out about it. So anyway, the first book that I wanted to talk about was Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. This one was extremely fun to read, especially since the first Dickens book I read I really didn't like. And so I had very low hopes for this one, very low expectations. And I was greatly surprised. Right? Exactly. Anyway, I annotated this to filth. You can see all my tabs. I had such a fun time reading this and discussing it in class. I was really drawn to, there was one specific theme that was really catching me. Oh, ghost imagery. There's lots of like ghostly descriptions and fog and a woman in a white sheet and cold chills. And it was really, really fun to go capture those moments and make sure I was pulling them out. I actually didn't end up writing a paper about this one, but if I did, it would have been about ghostly descriptions. So anyway, I had a great time reading this. It was just really fun, and I had a great time discussing it in class. So that's fun. And this is actually one of the ones that I need to read over the next few months. So I will be revisiting it soon. All right, the next book that I read for school just a few months ago actually was Dracula. I read this for the vampire tradition class I was a part of. So the vampire tradition class kind of talked about chivalric romances and how they transformed into the Gothic, and then how out of the Gothic we got the vampire tradition, and how the vampire tradition flirted with Gothic and medieval or chivalric romance tropes. And so we tracked a lot of stuff, a lot of vampire texts, whether it was poetry or short stories or a play or films or TV shows or novels. We read a whole bunch of vampire stuff, and so it was my first time reading this, and I had such a blast. I felt like every paragraph, every chapter had something to pull my attention in, and it was really fun seeing how some of the vampire tradition informed future vampire traditions, and then how Dracula had been informed by previous vampire work. So like obviously Bram Stoker was not the first person to write about vampires, and so he had been inspired, but then how he wrote Dracula inspired future iterations of how vampires are portrayed in texts. Anyway, I thought it was really cool, and yeah, I just thought it was super interesting, and I'm glad I finally read it because it was on my radar for like the last 10 years. So, woo! The next book that I had to read for school that really stood out to me was Don Quixote by Cervantes. This is such a hilarious novel for a book that was written so long ago. I was definitely not expecting to laugh out loud as much as I did. I was also incredibly intimidated by such a long and old book. I was like, this book was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I'm not going to understand it. I wish I didn't have to read it. But it was also one of my grandma's favorite books. And so I was like, I'm intimidated because I think I'm not smart enough to understand it. But then also because if I don't like it, I feel like I'm somehow gonna let my grandma down, you know? But I ended up loving it. I thought it was fantastic. And I thought what Cervantes did with the chivalric knight romance trope was so brilliant. And the fact that you don't know who the true narrator is or who the true author is wonderfully done. Cervantes even talks about himself. He names himself in this book, and he even like makes a little quip about his own writing. So really, really excellent. Really loved it. And if you've ever been interested in reading it and you're like, oh, I'm intimidated, it's super accessible and super fun. So highly recommend. This next book, although it's technically considered like an epic, is a book that I am so shocked I ended up enjoying as much as I did, because this is the class in grad school that I think I was the least excited to take. And it was a Milton class where you read a bunch of Milton's work, and I read Paradise Lost. It doesn't look like it here, but trust me, I did, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating. I annotated so much of it, but I was so intimidated by it. I thought, why are you even doing this, Noelle? You're too dumb to understand this. But I knew I needed like an early modern class to graduate. And exciting news! I ended up getting an A in my Milton class, and I was not expecting that. So it was very, very exciting. It was one of the most brilliant classes I've taken, and I just thought it was so fascinating. And it makes this list because I so badly thought I was going to hate it. And so the fact that I liked it was really shocking, and it was probably one of the classes in grad school that I've learned the most from. So, Paradise Lost, my friend. All right, the next category is short story collections I really loved this year. My two favorites that I feel like I've talked so much about are The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, fantastic, phenomenal, super short, and yet not long enough by far. Oh my God, there could have been double the amount of stories and I would have just devoured them. I thought this was such a good collection and I was so invested in every single story. So I had such fun with this one. And then Her Body and Other Parties. Again, I've talked so much about this book, I feel like, but just each story added such value, and there's such like a sinister horror element to all of the writing in this book, but like, it's just so fun. I remember being like, okay, it's a little bit longer than a book like The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, so maybe it'll take me a little longer to get through, and maybe I'll take it slow. Not the case. Every time I finished one, I was like, yes, we're gonna start another one. And even just like the genre of each story changes. So I had such fun with both of these collections. I also just fell in love with short stories this year, so I'm really excited to see the ones that I pick up in 2022. All right, and the final category in this favorite books of 2021 video is romances. And the first one we're gonna start with is an arc. It's not out until May of 2022, I believe, but that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I was very, very lucky to get a copy on NetGalley, so thanks so much to Berkeley Publishing for sending that over to me, and I devoured it, I think, in a day and a half. I read at least over half of it in a single day, and I had so much fun. So this book follows two main characters that are in the publishing industry. So one is a literary agent and one is an editor. And on their first meeting, immediately it does not go well. Immediately they have some tension. They have some anger. There's some brewing, just tension, which is a word I just used, and we're here to use it again. And so when they end up meeting up again a few years later, it's like immediate enemies. They're just like, you don't like me, I don't like you, this might never happen. And then we find that maybe the tension was caused by sexual tension, okay? And it was just a blast. I really liked the setting of this romance. I really liked that it was so closely tied to books and reading and editing, and like even the town that they're in is out of a novel they love, and it's just really, really fun. So I had a great time reading this. I thought it was excellent, and I can't wait for it to come out in May, and then I can read the audiobook or listen to the audiobook, which is, I believe, narrated by Julia Whalen, who's my favorite audiobook narrator, but she's narrated Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. So really excited for it to come out, really enjoyed it, and I had to mention it. So that's the first romance. The second romance on this list is interesting because I actually wouldn't really classify it as a romance. It feels more like fiction and devastation to me, but there is a heavy romance in it, so that's why it's in this category, and that is Lizzie and Dante. I read Lizzie and Dante right after I finished Malibu Rising, and I was still near the ocean, and it was beautiful and wonderful, and like it was so atmospheric. And this is also one of my favorite covers of 2021. I think it's actually my absolute favorite cover of 2021. And so I was definitely just drawn by the cover. And then I dove in. I will say I fell in love with this book, and then I was also just felt my heart carved out of my chest, ripped out and thrown across the room. That's how bad the ending hurts. So if you're looking for a good cry, this one will do that for you. If I'm any barometer or any judge, I sobbed to this one, and it hurt really bad. So the story basically is this. Lizzie is a Shakespeare professor that's helping with the script on a Romeo and Juliet adaptation, and then Dante is a world-famous chef that's very humble. Like, he has this very small Italian restaurant, so he's like a world-famous chef, but then he comes home and cooks in Italy, and it's this like really ramshackled, like quiet, cozy kind of restaurant. He just doesn't care because he's like, I'm here to cook. I'm not here to impress because cooking is my love. And the two of them meet, and upon meeting, there are sparks, there is interest, there is tension, there is a bit of not knowing what the future holds, and it's just beautiful. I thought the descriptions were stunning. I loved that it was set on like the coast of Italy. I loved that Lizzie is like the Shakespeare professor. I just thought that was really cool and interesting. That's like working on a screenplay. And so I was devastated, and it just really stuck out to me. So there you go. And then, of course, the last two romances I have to mention are two romances I will not shut up about. I tell everyone about them. I mentioned it in my last video. It's never ending, folks, and that is number one, Act Your Ave, Eve Brown. This is the last in the Brown Sisters trilogy. It's also my favorite in the Brown Sisters trilogy. Eve Brown has my heart, she has my soul, and the romance is delicate and beautiful, and it glimmers off the page. Everything I could want. Super steamy and super beautiful. Really, really enjoyed it. Definitely one of my favorites. And then, of course, I mean, we knew this one was coming. The Heart Principle, which is the third book in the Kiss Quotient series. Stunning, wonderful, acceptance, love, intrigue, steam, two hearts molding as one, conversations around health and being a caregiver and the strain that can put on a person. And I just thought it was so good. It was a book that I was so excited for this year, and it did not disappoint, and I just loved it. All of Helen Hong's books just get it, you know? They get the romance needs and the steamy needs, and she just does it so right. So I loved this book so much. And I mean, I loved all of these books so much, my friends. So that is the end of this video. Those were my favorite books of 2021 from all different types of categories. Again, please let me know what some of your favorite books were this year and why, right? Like if your favorite was a memoir, let's talk. If it was a romance, let's talk. I would just love to know what everyone loved reading this year and also what you're excited to read in 2022. So love you all. Thank you all for being here. I hope you had fun and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.